My name is Emily Beynon, and today I'm going to talk about articulation. To articulate is to express oneself clearly in terms of argumentation or pronunciation, or hopefully both. The listener needs to be able to follow an argument and discern the words the speaker is saying. In flute playing terms, we're basically talking about how to start notes and how to give a logical musical texture to a phrase. As Michel de Bost writes in his book, The Simple Flute, articulation is a technical tool. As such, it's a means to an end. Imagination and meaning are the guiding forces. So since articulation is such a huge topic, what I thought I would do today is to share with you my top 10 tips for improving your articulation. Firstly, commit to spending a set amount of time every day for the coming month to working on your articulation. Even if it's just 10 minutes a day, I promise that focusing your attention for those extra minutes will improve your articulation. You don't need to make it too complicated. It's more about how and why you practice a particular articulation exercise rather than what you practice. I like to stick to good old-fashioned Taffanel and Gobert scales, the exercice journalier, daily exercises, number 4. The tongue is a muscle. Well, actually it's 8 muscles. So by training it in short bursts every day, you should notice a clear improvement within a month. And don't worry, that's not one of the top 10 tips, but let's get started right away. Tip number 1. Remember that articulation is still based on air. That's how we create sound. So if you're working on a staccato passage, practice it first legato. Then play it again using flutter-tonguing, and then perhaps even a third time, this time singing and playing together. Now try it again staccato, and I'm sure you'll find it already sounds better. The legato playing will ensure firstly that your airstream is healthy and continuous, secondly that your air speed is correct, and finally that your fingers are even, so that your tongue doesn't get the blame for any uneven fingers. Tip number 2. Think of a single staccato note as being a release rather than an attack. Visualize a string player playing a pizzicato note. The sound is actually made as they release the string, not as they lift it. So for this exercise, play a long note, then block the embouchure hold gently with your tongue to stop the airflow, then release the tongue back away from the lips and the sound will start again, like this. This will remind you that the sound happens when you remove your tongue, and hopefully it will also encourage you to keep the jaw low and relaxed and the throat open for articulation just as it is for playing long notes. Tip number 3, double staccato or double tonguing. As the name suggests, in this way of articulating, the tongue makes 2 movements, and it's basically this action, taka 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 tak, or maybe daga 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 da, depending on the situation. Now, the best way to improve your double tonguing is to actually improve your single tonguing. But personally, I also like to practice the second stroke on its own too, ka 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 ka, or ga 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 ga. For light, clear double tonguing, use tiki tiki ti or teka teka te. But for a more sung-through double staccato, you might want to use daga 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 da. And check that your tongue doesn't go too far back in your mouth for the second stroke. The tongue only needs to disturb the airstream, and if you take your tongue too far back, the k or g stroke will always be too slow and heavy compared with a t or d stroke. And what I think is very important when you're practicing double staccato is to make sure that the action itself is always fast. It's like a bounce or a reflex. The energy of one part is dependent on the energy of the other part. So start with dagada, dagada, dagada. Then move on to da-ga-da-ga-da, 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 da-ga-da-ga-da. And then on to da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da, da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da, da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da. And on to da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da, da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da, da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da-ga-da. And by the way, it's really useful to have a very good overlap between your fast single tonguing and your slow double tonguing. That will give you great flexibility and will come in very handy. Tip number 4, triple tonguing. In my opinion, if you have a healthy double staccato, then triple staccato becomes pretty much unnecessary. If your k or g are strong enough, then taka-taka-taka-ta will always sound faster and more fluid than taka-ta-taka-ta-ta, with that awkward double T in the middle. Tip number 5, variety of lengths. Now, a staccato dot can, as I've mentioned before, mean 100 different things. So consider varying the length of staccato according to the musical situation. For example, in this section of William Tell, I would suggest that the notes closer together, or even the same note, should be kept as short as possible, but the wider intervals could be played a little longer, more stroked, if you like. Tip number 6, varying the consonants and the vowels. Now, another way you can vary your staccato is to experiment with varying the consonant. Think of ta, da, ha and pa. Say them out aloud and feel where the action takes place in your body. Listen carefully to the sound, initially without the flute and then with the flute. Ta is the most far forward, and when I say it, I can feel the join between the top of my front teeth and the gum just above it with the tip of my tongue. Ta, 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 ta. Da is a little heavier, and I don't use quite the tip of my tongue, but a little further back, and it connects a little further back and higher in my mouth to the ridge of gum behind the teeth. Da, 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 da. Ha is using no tongue at all and is purely the belly. Ha, 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 ha. And pa is similar but uses slightly less belly and is combined with a gentle but fast release of air through the lips. Pa, 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 pa. In a similar way, varying the vowel changes the shape of the mouth. Where is your tongue when you say ta, te, ti, to, tu and da, de, di, do, do? Again, experiment first by feeling the sounds in your mouth and listening carefully as you say them, and then notice how they all sound slightly different when you use them playing the flute. Tip number 7, repeated notes. Now, basically, there are 2 ways of making repeated notes clear. The first way is to give a very strong attack on each note, of course. And the second, more subtle way is to release the sound of each note. So if we're saying ta, 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 and if we sustain the R sound, then we have to give quite a strong t to be clear. Ta, 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 ta. But if we release the R sound or even close the mouth into a tum gesture, we can soften or lighten the consonant and still make it clearly understood. Tum, dum, 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 dum. Tip number 8, the tongue out or grape-pip articulation. Now, if you remember in tip number 2, we talked about stopping the air, blocking the embouchure hole between the lips with the tongue. Then removing the tongue again and the sound restarting. Now, if you do this a little more vigorously, as if you're spitting out a grape-pip, this can be a really useful way of starting notes. I generally use it in 2 different ways. First, for quite a strong, clear start to a note in the low register. and then in the third octave for a much more gentle, soft attack. What it does is that it ensures that the air stream and the air column and the embouchure are all engaged and in exactly the right position at the start of the note. It's almost as if I'm blowing against my tongue and then release it. Quickly in the low register for a strong, clear start, and more gently in the third octave for that soft beginning. Check out how Marcel Moyse describes this method of articulation in his book De la Sonorité, and remind yourself of his exercise. Tip number 9, finger tonguing. Now, this is a somewhat controversial technique and is in some circles even considered bad technique, but I must say I find it to be quite helpful at times. In this technique, you kick the airstream into life, not by using your tongue, but by very gently tapping your finger on the key next to the note you're going to play, just as you start the note, without using any tongue. Now, just to be very clear, this is not an aggressive key slap. It should be virtually inaudible, and all we hear is a very clear front to the note. Tip number 10, slurs. Now, so far I've only spoken about starting notes, but my final tip today is about elegantly lifting slurs. And remember that articulation is about clarity of the text or texture, and here slurs can play a vital role. A slur over a group of notes gives more importance to the beginning of that group and diminishes the importance of the end. And this applies whether the slur goes over 2 notes or 10 notes. The principle remains the same. There are exceptions, of course, but you could say that generally speaking, a slur is some form of diminuendo or release. And applying this rule in Baroque and classical repertoire will immediately give an elegant transparency to your articulation. Get familiar with this way of approaching slurs when you're practicing your daily scales, and by the way, you'll probably find that the next articulated note after a slur can be played much lighter and will sound much cleaner if you lift the end of the slur before. So these are a few of my favourite articulation tips, and as a last bonus tip, just remember that your ears are your most important teachers when it comes to articulation. We all have a slightly different shaped mouth and tongue and teeth, and no one can see inside your mouth as you play, and more importantly, nor can they see inside your imagination to know how you want it to sound. So keep experimenting with your ears wide open, listening for what sounds best for you. Next time, I'll talk about one of the orchestral excerpts where articulation plays a very important role. Saint-Saëns' Carnaval of the Animals, the movement about the birds, volière. So I hope you've enjoyed this. See you next time.